and welcome to In Conversation With. I'm Natasha Kathi-Chandra, Artistic Director at Tara Theatre and also the Director of I Dream of Theresa May.
And I'm Vivek Nityananda, who's the playwright of I Dream of Theresa May.
Welcome Vivek, and thank you for joining me today at Tara Theatre. I've got a couple of questions to ask you about this brilliant piece of new writing that is coming up soon here at Tara. So to kick us off, the play is set 10 years ago, yet, as you know, it feels so much more relevant now, given the current political climate. What reflections do you think that we can take away from the style of government that is presented in I Dream of Theresa May at the time this play is set? Has anything really changed since?
I think a lot has changed, and if anything, it's got the rhetoric in the play or where it came from, which is basically starting off with the hostile environment. I think that has got normalized, and we're basically living continuously in the hostile environment, so it's not just a one-time thing, because what we have now is a constant debate about immigration, constant talking about it, and constantly talking about ways to reduce it. While at the same time, I feel at least, not recognizing contributions that immigrants make and sometimes even demonizing. I think that's definitely changed over the years.
Yeah, it feels like the phrase hostile environment keeps coming back, but sort of rephrased by different politicians and rephrased by different people. And I think given the events that happened this weekend in London, especially, which I used to feel London was almost separate from the rest of England. Obviously, lots of people descended into London over this weekend. And I saw so many clips of people who look like you and me, who look like lots of, like the people who are being demonized, who were so angry about them for obvious reasons, but also talking so much about their contributions to society, the amount it costs to actually get your indefinite leave to remain, that you need a job and which is all things that we talk about in the play as well. You need a job, you need to make a certain threshold, and it takes how many other years it takes as well. And there were lots of people who said, oh, let's hit you with some facts, which it feels like so much more that people are just not aware of, and they don't know the numbers, they don't know the statistics, the actual statistics that make up who the illegal immigrants are, and all of these things as well. You were in Newcastle, I'm presuming, over the weekend. What's the climate feeling like up there?
Actually, I mean, I guess there isn't currently a march up there, but it feels fine. But there was, because, I mean, was it last year? There were the riots as well, and around Newcastle and Sunderland, there was this presence which did feel even dangerous to go out, or, you might feel attacked. But I think at Newcastle, we did have a really strong counter-protest, which really cheered me up. And they were, I don't remember the slogan and posters, but, they were really punchy, and I think that really made a big difference. I feel Newcastle is essentially really friendly and supportive. And I remember this conversation, of course it is many years ago now, with a cab driver who said, we don't mind where you're from as long as you're not stuck up. And I think that is the kind of, or you're not up your ass, I think is how he might have put it.
Yeah.
But, I think that is the defining thing. And in some ways, maybe people from Newcastle would judge people from London more harshly than just me. So it feels nice, but, you don't know. And I think some of watching the march in London, some of the fear is that it's almost like a meme that we want to do that as well. And that can really spread and can catch fire, so to speak, anywhere. And that is scary. And it's not, it doesn't feel like almost like the country I came to anymore. And maybe for many people who grew up here, it may not feel like the country that they grew up in some ways.
Yeah, which is scary and heartbreaking. And I just want to touch upon something really pertinent that you said about the cab driver.
Yeah.
And he said, we don't mind where you come from as long as you're not stuck up or, whatever. And I think as well, what I love about I Dream of Theresa May specifically is, even though we're talking about a specific political climate, a specific government at the time where the hostile environment has come from, we also spend a lot of time looking at the other characters in this piece as well, and the representation of the other side of Britain, the two sides to the coin, in the representation of Noor and the protests and what she stands for in the play. Do you feel like that's also, like you said, the hostile environment feels like it's got worse? Do you feel like the other side of the coin as well, which is the people who attend the counter protests and the stand up to racism protests, do you feel like that's also growing in strength and in numbers as well?
I think there's more of a feeling of the need to show up and the need to counter things. Where, of course, online, and I think a lot of this does stem from conversations online and then comes out into real life.
Yeah.
So there's much more of that happening, but there is much more happening even on the streets, if you like. It's just this shift of balance where previously people might have thought that is something normal. Like, we don't need to protest against racism because everyone agrees racism is bad, or people agree that immigrants contribute to society, so we don't need to go and scream out that they are helping us. Whereas perhaps now feel a bit more that no, we need to make this point, and we need to make this really strongly. And that's why they're going out and the numbers are increasing, which is really nice. You mentioned that because Noor is someone who has grown up in the UK, and I think I also wanted that character, and of course many different kinds of people who are supportive, people of all races, of immigrants, and a whole different kind of politics. And that is a huge number. And even though, I've been following numbers and debates about immigration because I guess I'm interested in it, and clearly that's made its way into the play. And yes, the numbers of immigrants have gone up hugely, but if you still ask people, even now, the largest number of people still support immigration and do agree. But you wouldn't know that from how politicians talk about it, from how media outlets talk about it. And I think that's where then people say, okay, if they're not doing it, we need to make this point.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vivek. My next question is, what can the show tell us about the attitudes towards issues such as the LGBTQIA plus communities, ideas of immigration, not just sort of in wider British culture, but specifically through South Asian communities as well? There are these two really key themes running parallel in the story. I'm just really interested in why those made their way into the play for you. What are the attitudes towards some of these issues in your experience, in your opinion, and how you represented them in the play as well?
Okay, there's a lot there. I think for me, the key thing in terms of the LGBT experience, or being gay and moving to the UK, was at the time that I moved, after I moved here, India's had this kind of up and down relationship with whether being gay was legal or not. I mean, it is now, but then there was this period where it wasn't. Well, most of my life it wasn't, then it got legalized and it wasn't. So then in that sense, the UK having values that, you are free to be who you are here, it becomes a really strong point. And, I feel like that's something that I wanted to explore, those dynamics, or that tension almost. You are an immigrant and you want to come here, but you might still want to have your roots, but you still really, appreciate what you can be here and how free you can be here. And so there is perhaps some amount of tension there, which is what I wanted to put into the play. But I think there's other things which the play talks about, is in both ways, whether it's an immigrant or an LGBTQ plus person, how do you become part of the mainstream? Whether you want to or don't want to, that's the first question. But also, if you do want to become part of the mainstream, what does that entail? And is there a way of becoming mainstream while still remaining true to your values? Or do you need to, change who you are and change how you relate to even other people who are LGBT plus or who are other immigrants to become mainstream? And that's really something that's at the core of the play. Of course, there are different characters and they all make different choices. But perhaps one of the things which I'm putting out in the play to consider is that the more mainstream you get, you actually move away from your queerness or from your immigrant roots.
And I think when I read early versions of this draft, that was something that really spoke to me. The big questions that you're asking around the mainstream and what it means to be part of the mainstream and who defines what it means to be mainstream as well. But I think for me, there was this huge question for me around freedom. What does it mean to be free if you're persecuted from back home for whatever reason, whether you identify as queer, whether you're a woman, and then you come into a country where you feel, as you said, like that one of the values is free to be who you want to be and who you are. But when it's set up against the background of, but you're also an immigrant, you're also working class, you're also all of those things. And parts of, I think for me, the most fascinating process in this play is what part of you shrinks, or at what cost, what's the price you pay for integrating or assimilating or becoming part of the mainstream. And is it worth the cost? Is it worth the friends you might lose or the family you might lose, or all of those things? And I don't have an answer to that, and as an artist, never want to be part of the mainstream, always want to be the rebel. But equally, that is such a huge question. And I think I'm really looking forward to inviting an audience into that question as well, whether they have answers or not, but definitely inviting them into that and asking them, at what cost, when you assimilate, at what cost of your identity goes away when you start to become like everybody else? And is it that the strength in humanity lies in our differences to be celebrated, and finding that community in our differences when we're being told so much that we're all different and therefore we should all hate each other or we should all be against each other? I think for me, asking those big questions without giving very obvious answers, in my opinion, in the play, I mean, I think there is an answer there. There is an answer in the play because we see what happens in the journey of the character. But that for me was a really big question, this concept of freedom, and are we really free, and who is free, and what does it mean to be free? It's really exciting that we've spent time really interrogating that.
No, I mean, I should say, like you said, that you can see that there is an answer, but I don't think I've written the play to provide that answer saying this is the way it is. And I don't think we have to necessarily pay the cost to become mainstream or even be part of the mainstream. That's not necessarily true. But in some ways, it's also about thinking about whether you want to be and what does it mean not to be, but also who feels the pressure to be part of that. And I think, again, it's often minorities, really broadly defined, who might feel that pressure that you can't even progress professionally without changing yourself. Whether sometimes it's just your accent, certain accents might not be allowed to progress because you're viewed a certain way, or the way you walk. There are so many things that and those are the pressures that are there, which kind of, like I guess you were saying, iron out the differences. And that's when you actually achieve success. And you see this, I mean, I often think about this, again, going back to accents or something. There's a certain type of presenter on TV, or there's a certain type, and you listen to the voice, or sometimes even, talks which you get from people higher up at your workplace, and everyone has the same voice, and they have the same patterns. And it's like, why? How did that happen? Where did that difference go? But then maybe you don't want to even join those professions. I mean, this is a choice everyone has to make. And I don't know, I think part of the play is also me kind of questioning myself and saying, maybe I've given up some things, or I'm not doing certain things which I could be doing. I'm sure people could easily point out things that I could be doing which I'm not doing. And I'm not doing them because sometimes it's more helpful to live a life sometimes.
I love the conversation about accents. It always reminds me of this brilliant experience at Tara, actually, where I had a colleague called Devashree, and she's from India as well. And when I spoke to her in, say, an accent that I grew up speaking in. And I remember Abdul, who's our previous artistic director, saying to me, you change your accent when you speak to Devashree. And I said to him, no, Abdul, I change my accent when I speak to you. that accent I speak to Devashree in is my actual native accent. And I don't know at what point I started to change that when I moved. Where did the switch come? But every time I speak to people where the language is familiar or the style in which we speak is familiar, it goes back to, and I don't know where it comes from. It's almost like, it's code switching, of course, but it's also when you talk in your native language and how you switch between those languages in your head as well. I don't know where it came from. It just comes out.
It's a very unconscious thing.
It's a very unconscious thing. Right. I'm looking forward to that in the play because we've got a mix of such incredible actors from so many different backgrounds, and we're going to have that richness of, authentic native sounds and language and rhythm and tone. And that's another thing in this script that I really enjoyed. I sort of got it. I didn't need to read it once or twice, I sort of was like, this is the way I speak. This is how my friends speak. It was one of those things that I found really exciting and really sort of drawn to the play about. And you do that so well. So thank you. Thank you for doing that, Vivek. My next question is, there's different ideas of identity, values, activism that are all presented in the play. While we see the protagonists becoming more self-absorbed as the play goes along, while his friend Jyoti rallies against this and feels so strongly about the causes that she's fighting for. What do you think that this says about our current political climate? And we talked a little bit about this earlier as well, but you've written that so profoundly in your piece, the nuances of that as well. What do you think that that's saying about our current political climate?
I think it's just a hard world to deal with right now. For everybody. I mean, even for the people on the march in London, well, many of them are having hard times. And so people are choosing the best way to protest against whatever they're feeling. And, there are ways in which I think are unacceptable, and there are ways in which, I think might actually make a difference. But then the easiest thing sometimes to do is to just ignore all of it. And to just, like you said, the word self-absorbed.
Focus on yourself.
Focus on yourself.
Yeah.
Focus on yourself. Shut out the news. That's a temptation for me too. I have my work, I have my life, and I just want to get on with it. And actually, most of us, that's what we want to do. We just want to get on with our lives. Even apart from what we were talking about, the mainstream and, deciding where to go and stuff like that. I think even apart from all of that, we just want to be able to have our life. I think it's a Toni Morrison quote where the real function of racism is often to distract you from, I'm paraphrasing it badly, but it's to distract you from leading your normal life.
Yeah.
And I think having to deal with racism or any kind of bigotry or poverty or whatever it is means you just can't get on with doing what you want to do. And that's something, I guess, people make different choices at that point. And if you can afford to, try to ignore it sometimes.
I think you make a really good point about, especially quoting Toni Morrison. The general sentiment is a lot of people are angry.
Yeah.
Angry about a lot of things. The cost of living, how expensive everything is, lack of money, salaries. I mean, I remember when my weekly shop at Tesco used to be £20, and now my weekly shop at Tesco has tripled over the last, even more than that sometimes. And I know that people are angry. I was on my way in here and the Victoria line stopped and I was angry. That's coming from someone like me, and I can imagine other people who are in much more low socioeconomic groups, who are working long 50, 60-hour weeks. The tube strikes happened last week for all of the reasons that, I understand, but the people that it's affecting, people are so angry. And the way that, especially, we talked so much about the dream of Theresa May in this piece. And what is she a manifestation of? Who is she a manifestation of? It is this rhetoric. It is this propaganda. People are looking for a scapegoat. And the easiest thing to do with angry people is to make them angry with a specific group of people. And at the moment, it is all directed at the migrants and the asylum seekers. It's frustrating. And sometimes I remember I spent all of my weekend looking at what was happening and wanting to be updated on that and feeling like I missed out on the weekend with my family because I was so consumed in what was happening. So yes, a distraction is one way to describe it, but also, a lot of us just want to get on with our lives and work and live and love and do what we, and get on with it. And a lot of us do work very, very hard and people are angry. I know that I am. It's just frustrating that it's being manipulated in the wrong directions, I think, by people in power.
Sure, but I mean, I guess there's also individual responsibility.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's something, and I turn that lens also again back to myself. But I think the way I think of it sometimes is to think about what are the things that you can do to help? Doom scrolling.
Yeah.
I know it's not good for me. It's good to keep abreast of the news and to know what's happening. But apart from that, once I know what's happened and maybe get an overview of it, I don't have to keep wallowing in it. As what I need to do is to try and find the ways that can actually help. Whether it's people choosing who go out on marches or donations, engaging
in conversation with like-minded individuals. Yeah. Don't doom scroll. That's really good advice from Vivek.
I mean, it's hard to resist, I know, but yeah, I mean, I do it all the time.
So do I. Practice what we preach as well.
Like, do as I say, not as I do. Yeah, identifying those ways you can make a difference.
Yeah. And
doing that can make life better. So you're actually 100%. Doing something while not ignoring the problem, and then it might be, you can balance those things with the pleasures of life and the things that you enjoy about life as well.
Absolutely. And if there was one thing to take away from a show that was on at Tara earlier this year, A Practical Guide on How to Save the World, where no one fucking else is, it is that there isn't one way to protest.
Sure.
And there isn't one way to show your solidarity or care about a cause. And I think sometimes it can and does feel like everybody's under pressure to say something, to respond to something. And I think people are doing lots of things. Mm-hmm. I know there was a lot of conversation about how big the numbers were this weekend and how small the numbers were for the Stand Up to Racism march. Again, how do you know like what's real, what's not real? I know so many people who were there at the Stand Up to Racism march. I know so many of my peers and my friends who went out over the weekend to the Stand Up to Racism march, to the Cultural Workers for Palestine protest. So people are doing things. That is light and that is comfort. I think looking after yourself so we can be enabled to look after each other and people who we care about is sometimes the best thing you can do.
And also, I should say, in terms of like light and comfort, you're saying over there, feeling that you're doing something. Sometimes I think of it as like there's this fear which, or sometimes I'm gripped by the inaction because I think it's not going to achieve its purpose, which might well be true often. I mean, I know it's kind of depressing to say, but many actions might not actually, change the world or something like that. But just doing them, makes a difference to you and to the world. That it's being done is a statement in its own right. And when you know something is right to do, you just go ahead and do it. And it doesn't matter whether it's going to change the world or not.
Well, you did a big action, Vivek. You wrote I Dream of Theresa May. And we're just talking about important themes and asking lots of really big questions. So this is going to move me to the play feels like it's quite humorous. It's quite funny, it's written with a lot of satire, and obviously the themes are big and they're heavy as well. Why do you think that satire and humor is important when speaking about issues like this?
It allows you to engage with an issue in a different way.
Yeah.
I feel often we can get, especially if we are trying to talk across divides or people disagree with you in some ways, you can get stuck in the same old debates and everyone knows what everyone's position is and you don't necessarily get anywhere. But I feel like satire sometimes breaks that.
Yeah.
I hope, let's say, that satire can break that. And then it can then get people to see things differently or to throw up questions for themselves. And I'm not necessarily saying that I don't think I have a very clear, moral of the story, so to speak, in the play. But I do hope that it then can get people to start thinking. I really feel that that's one way in which it can happen, where people are like, yeah, that's funny, and then it clicks, and it's like, why is that funny?
Yeah.
And what exactly do I feel about that? Suddenly, maybe I feel uncomfortable, or am I laughing at myself, or am I laughing at someone who I shouldn't be laughing at?
Yeah.
It can lead to all these different feelings within the audience. But in an ideal world, it's just something more fun. Like it draws people into a topic in a way that's easier for people to come into. It's not just in terms of satire, but in terms of using any kind of genre as well. So if you had a horror film that deals with certain topics, or you had a crime thriller that deals with certain topics, I think these are ways in which people get into debates because through stories, and I think stories really do that to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think communities like this represented in the play for people who are dealing with a lot of their, a lot of pressures and a lot of challenges. I think joy and humor is such a big part of how they lead their lives too. When exploring quite heavy themes and topics, like you said, I agree, satire and humor are a way in. I love watching a play and feeling uncomfortable into what am I laughing at? Why am I laughing? I love asking those questions as well. But I also think that here are communities that are seldom represented on stage. Here are people that are seldom represented on stage. And these are people who are like other people. They crack jokes and they find things funny, and things are hard, but they laugh their way through it. And, and I think that's also such an important part of the story we're telling and why we're telling it and why we're showing these characters specifically. So you touch a little bit on this, but it's also to wrap this conversation up a little bit is my final question is, what would you like audiences to take away from I Dream of Theresa May?
I think a lot of it is to think about where we're at right now as a country, but also where the roles that we play in this. One focus of the play is, it's not spelled out, but it's about complicity. So at what point are we aiding the things that we don't like or that we disagree with, just by how we use, how we change our lives, how we try to fit in, all of these things. If people can question that, that will be an achievement for the play, if you like. And I think it would also be nice if, maybe broadly, the other themes of the play about immigration, about LGBTQ+ people, and how we might, I guess I don't think of them as other, but we might think of them as other, but also have a window into their lives to see whether that changes your attitude to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Vivek, for sharing insights into your process as a playwright, into why you wrote this play, into your experiences, your own personal experiences as well of being here. It's been so brilliant to talk to you. I can't wait for all of the conversations that we're going to continue to have When can people come and catch I Dream of Theresa May?
I Dream of Theresa May runs at Tara Theatre. It previews on 17th November and runs until 29th November. So please come and see it if you can. I'd really love to have as many people as possible come and watch the play. Thank you.
We can't wait to welcome you. Come and catch I Dream of Theresa May exclusively on at Tara Theatre.